Good morning. It's Friday, January 20th, 2023 at 8:30 in the morning. I'd like to call this special Darien Board of Education Policy Committee to order. The next meeting is to be determined. Our first order of business is the election of a committee chairperson. May I have a nomination? Ms. Worm.
I'd like to nominate Dave Brown.
Okay, do I have a second? Second. Thank you, Ms. Parent. All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay, the motion passes. Thank you very much. Congratulations, Mr. Brown, and thank you for serving as chairperson.
So good morning. Following the agenda we have today, our next order of business will be a review of new board policies and revisions. We have a number of different items up to date for policies. I'd like to turn it over to Marge for a moment to give a brief introduction. If it's okay with everybody else on the board, Marge can give an overview, and then we can go, if anyone has any specific questions on any of the items proposed or any language changes, then we could open it to discussion for each individual one.
So go through the whole list first.
Yeah, I don't know that you need to read aloud, or if you want to give an overview and touch on the items, that I think that would be sufficient, and then we can get into detail as desired.
Okay, so most of the policies for consideration today are due to changes in the law. So the attendance and truancy, the meal charging, field trips. We made some stylistic changes based on advice from Shipman and Goodwin. These all reflect the current district practice, and the only one that's stands separate from that are challenges to instructional materials. Shipman and Goodwin doesn't have a model policy for this, but they've done work with a couple of other districts and have vetted policies for other districts.
I thought it was maybe up.
Okay.
So they vetted the challenge to instructional materials policy for other districts, but there's no right or wrong. It's more of a cultural thing, so we can make changes. Nothing is set in stone.
Thank you very much, Marge. Did anyone have any comments on any of the items? I could read through row by row, or if people would like to flag individual, if there are any comments to the language.
You just want to go.
We can go row by row.
Yeah.
Okay. So policy 5130, which is a revision to the attendance policy.
I'm fine.
Anyone else got any comments? Everyone's good?
Zero.
Okay. Moving on, policy 5830, meal charging, which is a new policy. Anyone have any comments, changes, thoughts?
That was fine with me.
Okay. Policy 6220, challenges to instructional materials.
This one has some questions for me.
Okay, please.
I mean, I guess just jumping right through, I guess the overarching question that I have is, what is an instructional material, and should we define that further? Actually, I think we should define that further. Does that mean just books? Does that mean online site things that are used? Does that mean pamphlets? Does that mean worksheets? What are we calling a instructional material? Because I just think that needs to be clarified so that everybody is knowledgeable about what we mean when we say instructional material.
Essentially, clearly it would cover textbooks right away. And then it would be any other instructional resource that a teacher use, whether it's a site, a website, or whether it's a handout, or whether it's a resource, or it's all of those typical instructional materials that a staff member may use.
Great, and I agree with that. I just want to make sure that that's clear in here.
Yes, it's not limited to or preclusive to one thing or another, for the most part, most part.
Not on that, I have more, but Julie had a question.
Thank you. Does that mean that it does not include a concept, so to speak? An area of discussion that comes up in the course of a classroom that is not directly tied to a instructional?
No, we're not like that. This does not cover a discussion that a teacher is having.
Okay.
No.
Thank you.
My turn. Okay, so my issue with this is I feel that if you link it to, basically, if you look at the policy 6610, where we hand over our responsibility of overseeing instructional material, which
makes me, not that I want to review books, that's not what I want, but we are legally responsible. I think that policy needs to have guidelines. You know, I think there should be something as per board guidelines that maybe we have something in there. That way, because right now, challenging instructional material, it's like, what are we challenging, right? Like, there's no challenging against what? There's no guidelines out there. So what, I just don't like this, so I'm going to challenge it, right? And then when the group is then saying, oh, no, you know, they're going to deny the challenge based on what, right? Again, it's just so vague, all of it. I think we just need a lot more detail and need to take a look as a whole board. I don't think this is something that, I mean, we can look at it together, but I think eventually it needs to come to the whole board and have a bigger view, because this is just kind of out there in no man's land.
Please.
Thank you. But Marge, could you talk a little more about if this is a recommendation from Shipman and Goodwin, or this is in
Yeah.
response to our asking for something, this is what they've put?
It's in response to our asking for something, and because they had vetted it for another district, I thought we could, at least on the initial round, save some legal fees.
Mhm.
Again, this is very cultural to each particular town.
Okay.
I mean, it was vetted for Avon and Westport, just.
Okay. Do you mind if I follow up?
Please.
I question the idea of having parents on a review committee. As it says in the policy, you know, the materials are selected and recommended by people with training and expertise.
Mhm.
And I have concerns about then bringing parents into the mix who do not have experience and expertise and are there to essentially make a judgment or decision on another parent's comment based solely upon opinion. I think that's an kind of uncomfortable situation to create.
I'll back that up. I also don't feel like parents should be a part of this review committee. If that's what we end up with. I think it's a very sticky situation. Who are those three parents? How are those three parents chosen? Are they, you know, if they're nominated by the superintendent, how does he or she choose those people? Are they PTO chairs? It just opens up a lot of questions. And I think in our current climate, I think it would be it could become very divisive, and I think it would pit groups against groups and people against people. And to Julie's point about the expertise, I don't think that, you know, I don't know that parents should be included in this.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I think I would just follow up on that, and I agree that it gets a little sticky with this parent situation and being nominated. And I think it just all goes back to why there needs to be guidelines that we're all looking at, that we can see, that we can point to, that parents can point to, that administration can point to, that everyone's on the same page, that, okay, this is acceptable and this isn't, and this flies and this doesn't. And it's a little bit cleaner, because the way it's set up right now, you're right, it's just set up to have a massive division in our town.
Please, Mrs. Best.
Maybe part of what Tara's proposing, but I also would like to have a discussion on whether there should be a provision where the district is able to say that this is not going forward to a review committee, because I don't see that built in right now. And do we need to be able to assess and perhaps, I don't mean to be pejorative, but be able to declare something frivolous or not needed to be taken further. That might need to be built in to protect, you know, people's resources and time.
Al?
Yeah. So Shipman give us this, and Marge work with it, and our administration work with this a little bit just to tailor to where we felt it was. Honestly, I felt the board want something inclusive, so that's what we tried to make it as inclusive as we could, or as we felt that we could work with. It wouldn't get us bogged down. Look, initially, no matter what we put in place, it potentially can get us bogged down on the number of people who go through it or otherwise. I think it's clear here that it's not always the same people, right? It's a different committee per incident. But in response to you know, the discussions, ongoing discussions that we've had over the past year and so on, we felt that we could manage this system. So I'm not going to put the parents down here if I'm not comfortable with it. But that being said, this was a starting point for discussion. So we took the lens of being as inclusive as we felt as we could be, while maintaining, you know, while maintaining judgment, because that's what we're trained in doing. But at the same time, we wanted to give the board the opportunity to make those decisions should it want to make them. But yes, I don't know that we would, once you open this up like this, which is fine. I don't think you can then say, well, this is certainly something that came to me or came through the whole process. If it was so frivolous, I would tell whoever, that the staff member, the parent or otherwise, in my opinion, this is so frivolous. Like, but if you have an option to do it and stuff and they want to go through it, then a frivolous one might take a very short period of time to resolve, versus something else.
Fair point.
Please.
So I have a question, Alan. I'd love your expert opinion on including the no more than 3 teachers representing the level and department of specialization germane to the complaint. Is there any benefit to having, say it's a high school complaint, is there any benefit to having an elementary school teacher on it with a completely separate set of eyes? Or
It doesn't preclude it. But if someone was assessing a kindergarten sort of informational resource or instructional resource, probably not like they were going to have a high school person like on that committee. So just to give some parameters, that those were some of the things that we'd be thinking about, that someone would have a sense of the grade level appropriateness, or someone would be engaged at some capacity around either the discipline or the developmental nature or grade level.
okay. In one of these, would a department chair be in this or not? Or would that be the designee of the GAI? Just curious if they would be involved, if it was a secondary question.
We could, I would think that probably the department chair would be involved in a lot of them. I think it doesn't necessarily mean that every single one, but
Right. Okay.
Any other questions or any comments at this point? All right, so I think what I'm hearing from the conversation is perhaps this needs to go up to the full board. My opinion is that it does. I think for twofold. One is we do have the curriculum policy as well, and I think we do need to look at the interplay. When this came down to us, we were really supposed to limit it to the review of instructional materials. So I think it would be appropriate to go back to the board. As to the policy itself, personally, I do see some problems with this structure. I think if we go back for a moment and think about the conversation, the materials that really motivated us reviewing this rule, and then we look at the policy that exists here, I'm not sure that this has the proper level of independence or the proper level of optically where it could not be perceived that there's a thumb on the scales from the administration. So I'm not sure we're going to solve the community need that this was set to create. And I think honestly, instead of having parents of current students, I think picking 3 names out of the phone book who don't have current students probably would be a little bit better for the community involvement. And I do think it's very important that we have the involvement of the community. We don't just have educational experts, but there is a component of, I think our education, our curriculum really needs to reflect the views and values of our residents. And so I think that really is part of what motivated this here. Without having that input as we do a review, which I don't see in this process, I'm not sure this is going to really satisfy the objective. But that being said, I think we do need to step back, look at both the curriculum as a guidelines and guardrails, if you will, in how this is implemented to see how it can really be applied. So my recommendation, I kick it to everyone else for a vote, is we should perhaps take this up or send it back to the full board for further discussion. Alternatively, perhaps we could make some potential changes as a subcommittee and then send those up to the policy to the full board. But I think either way, this is probably going to have to go up.
Well,
Any thoughts?
I think it has to go back to the full board, but
We could do some.
I think we should probably do some work prior, because I think it's a very unwieldy, bigger conversation that would 4 versus 9, it's easier to carry. And I think I have to push back on the conversation, the idea that people not involved in the school district in the community being on this. I don't see the value in that.
Yeah, and I think this goes to optics. I don't think Alan would cherry pick certain people that he thinks are preordained at a certain output, but the way it's structured, there would be that charge would come in and people would say, well, it just, cherry picks people. So of course they get the money they wanted.
So I go back to the
we
fact
don't
that
want-
these people in our district that we hire are the experts and they are the ones that are knowing what is best for our kids, but
Right.
I think that you and I have a different opinion on that, so.
We do, and I think on the fundamentally in the education and the involvement of just experts versus parents, absolutely. But I think here, just for the optics of this procedure, I'm not sure we're going to satisfy the people we're looking for in the community. And not that I'm saying that.
We're looking to satisfy, we're looking to satisfy 9,000 people, not the 20 that are complaining.
True, but I think that I'm not trying to imply that Alan would have his thumb on the scales, but I think as drafted, people would come up with that. And so I hate to see that be the result of this policy. Please.
Thank you. I would like to hear more about this idea that we need community members to ensure that our community values are being represented in our curriculum, because I'm not sure.
Well, I think
how
that's
that
the
works.
counterpoint to yours, that we have the experts and we rely exclusively on the experts to determine what's right educationally and academically. I don't think that's correct. I think we do have certain things in town that people want to see. For instance, robotics is not something that every town does or everyone values as an educational thing just because the experts say. That's something that we sought to do and other communities haven't. So I think there's plenty of examples of that exist.
I think that's a question of prioritization. I'm not sure that I would take that. Value takes me to a different place as far as what kind of community input we're looking for here. And I'm not sure that I want to use your example, 3 individuals picked out of the phone book, applying their values to the design of my students' curriculum or all the other students for that matter.
Understood.
I think this just goes back to why I keep saying like, there should be guidelines in place. Both policies are just too open, random. It gets rid of the idea that we need outside individuals coming in. If we've already have established guidelines that everyone can agree on, I think that kind of.
So
fixes
if I
our
may,
problem.
let me throw this out there. Why don't we go back to the full board? Say we want to have a little broader discussion. We want to involve the curriculum policy as well. We'll bring it back here. We can all circulate some drafts, work on some language individually, and then we can go through that process a couple turns. And then once we're ready, we can send it back to the full board. Does that work for anybody?
That works for
Sounds
me.
good.
Sounds good.
Okay. Mrs.
Excuse me, are you bringing the policy to the board? Or are you just going to report back?
The discussion. I think
Just
the
to report
discussion.
back at this time. We don't
Okay.
have anything. I mean, we have the draft. I think our proposal is going to be, look, we need to step back. We want to bring in the curriculum policy 6211, 221.
6610, I believe.
Thank you very much. Sorry. We'd like to bring that into scope as part of our discussion, take it back down to the subcommittee here, and then we'll do some work and be ready to come back to the board with something actionable at a later time, or we may come for one more turn for further input from the board. But I think at this point, we're not ready to turn this over.
I would agree. I'd like to see the committee do some more work on this section of the policies.
Great.
So,
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'm still a wee bit confused about what we're trying to do with the instructional policy or the 6110, but that's okay. So I'll wait till the board reflects on it and discusses it. And I'll hold back some comments as to if this changes or otherwise, which is fine. Or it might not be fine. It might have I think something also has to be based on some level of trust here. But that being said, I'll wait to see how things change or otherwise. And I'm also sort of curious just what we mean by going back to the policy. I know it sounds like we need guidelines. I'm not sure what those are. So we'll see.
Yeah, so as I see it, Alan, if anyone else disagrees, please, Ms. McCabe as well. We're limited. We're just looking at this one individual policy. I think Mrs. Worms brought up a good point. We need to look at this in context of the other policy. We don't have that charge right now as a subcommittee. We're going to go back, make sure we can do that, and then we're going to do further work to make sure we're looking at both in tandem to inform how this is drafted. And again, I'm not trying to imply that there'll be any favoritism. I just don't want that appearance because I don't want to hear that discussion moving forward. I want to have a clean, open, transparent policy that everyone says this is great. We're going to adhere to it, and we're not going to have anybody have complaints.
So Marge, I'm looking at 6610, which is the instructional materials selection and adoption, and we revised it last fall. And honestly, I don't remember our conversation about it. Was there conversation around guidelines? I don't remember having a conversation about that.
No, it was just delegating to the
Right.
district curriculum committee.
I just don't want to have a rehash of a conversation. Sorry.
Yeah, no, we didn't. We definitely didn't because, and truthfully, remember it kind of just happening and me going, how did I miss that? So I would have had that discussion then, and I apologize that when it came up, I kind of missed the boat.
All right, so it sounds like this is a little broader scope and we're gonna have some more work to do. Please, Jill.
Mr. Brown, may I suggest that your committee take a look at maybe some other comparable models and some other related policies before even coming back to the board? Because I think you may find you may need to touch that policy, or it may be a separate policy. So I agree with you. We've given you a specific charge, but you do have a full audit of the policies in front of you. I think you are okay to move forward with taking a look at this and then seeing if it touches other policies and then letting the board know. That be okay?
Thank you. All right, moving on. Policy 6630, Individuals with Disability Education Act, Alternative Assessments for Students with Disabilities for statewide and district-wide assessments, new policy. Any comments, questions? Anyone? Okay. Looks like policy 6710, field trips. Any comments, questions, thoughts? Okay.
I just have a
See,
quick question.
yes.
The last, this is probably just a typo, Mark. The last paragraph, like the redlining, didn't match up. I think it says, in addition, any such will be responsible for any field. It just doesn't, the redlining doesn't.
Is that in the regulations?
No, in the policy itself.
What page, sir? Where is it?
6710.
Yep.
Second.
The bottom
Page 29.
paragraph, as it starts all student field trips. It's the redlining continues into
In addition
I-
to research.
the last paragraph just doesn't make sense. It says, in addition, any
I
such.
see it.
Yeah,
So in addition, should have been struck, I guess, as well.
yes.
And the Board of Education. Yes. Yeah, we'll have to look at that last paragraph. So, yeah. You good? I'm good with that.
Yeah, I think there's a small edit in the last paragraph as well with the red line there.
Yeah.
Good. Any further discussion on 6710 field trips? Seeing none. 6810, reports of student progress. Comments, questions, thoughts? Seeing none. 6830, the honor roll. Okay. 6910, parent teacher communications.
I have a quick question. It says in here that the district will conduct 2 flexible parent teacher conferences for each school year. What happens at the middle school and the high school?
So open houses and those types of events
Those
kind
count
of
as
flexible. Yeah.
Okay, so they're 2 of them. So that there's one open house in the fall. What's the second option?
Well,
Curriculum night.
yeah, it could be a curriculum night. All of those things count.
Okay, I'm just not sure that I've had 2 interactions with my kids. I mean, granted, it's been through COVID, so it's a little wonky, but.
Right, so this requirement, interestingly, has been in effect since 2010, and I think that middle and high schools have used the term flexible broadly because they give parents opportunities to come, but it's not a parent-teacher conference. So all of those open houses and things are used to satisfy this.
Please, Ms. Moore.
So I actually, yeah, it's interesting because I did have a middle schooler not in COVID. That's how old I am. But yeah, we were always discouraged from parent-teacher conferences. We were always told that the teachers were too busy and that there shouldn't be team meetings or parent-teacher conferences unless your child was involved in a PPT.
At what level was this?
We were told like not
Middle
to
school.
talk to the teacher, like not to, not to have parent-teacher conferences, not if you like someone like my child didn't deserve that I was able to speak to the teacher and get feedback, that because she didn't have a PPT, it was always discouraged. So
Like formally discouraged?
it was pretty, not like from the board, but yeah, no.
From the administration.
From the administration, 100%. Yeah. It was very interesting
Well,
take.
I don't believe that's the case anymore. I would hope.
It's not the same administration, so.
Yeah.
I mean, I would like to think that it would be completely reasonable for a parent to take them out of school if they had concerns or so on, that probably extended beyond one teacher or something, that they could meet with the team or otherwise. I mean, I would fully expect that to happen.
Sorry if I may, I do recall that at one point a narrative was added to progress reports in middle school, in part to help facilitate a little more depth of
Yeah.
communication between parents and teachers on how their students were performing, which that might have been a piece of that. However, in my experience, I've never been denied the opportunity.
I mean, I just remember that, right, luckily, that child, there wasn't a lot of need, right? So, I mean, I guess if I had massive need, I would have gone in and made a stink about it, but I didn't. But I remember thinking, oh, it would be nice to hear how she's, what, any feedback, but hopefully that has changed.
My experience it has, but that's anecdotal.
I was always just happy when I didn't hear anything. Any other comments on 6910? Okay. 6920, weighted grading and calculation of grade point averages. Any comments, questions, concerns? Seeing none. 6930, parental access to instructional material, review of policy audit. Any comments, questions? No? I think we're good on that one as well. All right, so at this point, it looks like public comments is the next item on the agenda, unless anyone else had any other.
Anyone in person?
Or anything else to flag? We're good on the committee level?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Um, no, I was just curious about,
So I guess we'll move to public comment. That'd be great.
was Ms. Wormski? Oh, no, I was just curious about the weighted grading.
Okay.
If I thought it's talked about this, right? And this is a little bit, not so much about the policy, about, because we just recently had that issue where the letter went out and,
Yes.
right, so
Right.
some other person has my kid's social security number and all that stuff. So what are we doing? Like,
Well, those
is
are
there
two.
another way to do this that we're gonna manage it because I've gotten emails and texts too from people like, what's happening? Why is my kid's info being sent to other people?
Yeah, clearly, that's a glitch, and clearly we don't want to do that. Just moving forward, certainly for the interim period or vast interim period until we reconcile and are confident that it's been corrected. The mail merge has been used for a long time, so we'll diagnose the problem. But in the meantime, anything about grade point averages or so on will be sent directly through the mail.
Just to clarify, students' social security numbers were sent out. It was their state
It was their state ID
identification.
number.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct. Thank you for the correction of this. Correct.
And is there state reporting or anything we have to do or disclosures with an event like that, or?
No.
Or is it notification was great? Thank you. All right, now, any other comments, questions? We're good. Alan, please.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're on the same page for the board agenda. So I probably recommend that we be removing the agenda item, draft agenda item that they have at the moment of bringing any policies forward. So maybe, Mr. Chair, you would just update it in your update regarding committee meetings.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Can we do the first read of everything except 6220?
I think that makes sense.
Wait, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Can we do the first read Tuesday night of everything that we talked about today except for 6220?
I think that's where we were. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Did you say the first three?
No, the
No,
first
everything
read
except-
except for
He said first
6220.
read.
The first
First
read.
read,
We can, yeah.
might as well to keep them.
Might as well get them through.
Yeah.
and then-
It'll be quick. It'll be first read
Yeah.
anyway.
Perfect.
Well, then in that case, there is a first, then there is an agenda item.
There is an agenda.
Yes, but it'll be quick.
Correct. On the main board.
Did anybody have a comment on the audit? Or are you good with it?
I'm good with it.
All right.
We're fine.
We keep moving forward.
Yep, we're getting there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No, thank you. All right, so now public comment, please.
Anyone in person or online, please raise your hand. There are no raised hands at this time.
Well, thank you very much. May I entertain a motion to adjourn? First by Julie Best, second
Aye.
by Sarah Parents. All those in favor? And that passes.